The sun was sinking low, painting the sky in streaks of fire and blood. Heat shimmered across the open plain, the air heavy with the smell of dust and dry sage. Ethan Cole leaned against his saddle, eyes narrowed against the horizon. He was a man who had grown used to silence, the kind that pressed against your ribs until you swore it could crush you. The ranch stretched out behind him, empty except for the creak of a barn door and the restless pawing of his lone horse. It had been years since laughter had filled those fields, years since the cries of his boy or the gentle voice of his wife had threaded through the wind. Now there was only Ethan, stubborn as the stones that dotted the earth, carrying ghosts in every step. The stillness shattered. Gunfire cracked like thunder from the direction of the canyon. Ethan's head snapped up, and instinct took over. His hand found the rifle slung across his back before his mind caught up to what his ears had told him. Shots echoed again, sharp, hurried, desperate. He swung into the saddle, spurring the horse forward, hooves drumming across the hardpan. The wind whipped grit into his eyes, but he didn't slow. Something in that sound, fear hidden in the rattle of bullets, dug its claws into him. As he crested the ridge, the scene unfolded below. Two riders bore down on a third, their horses kicking up clouds of red dust. The hunted man swayed in his saddle, blood soaking the front of his shirt. Another shot rang out, striking him square in the shoulder. He toppled, tumbling into the dry creek bed like a sack of grain. His pursuers wheeled to finish the job. Ethan didn't think. The rifle cracked, once, twice. One outlaw pitched sideways, dead before he hit the ground. The other jerked his reins, eyes wide, then bolted, disappearing into the hills. Ethan dismounted and slid into the creek bed, boots crunching against loose gravel. The fallen man lay twisted, breath ragged, lips flecked with blood. Up close, Ethan saw a face hardened by more than sun, a man with eyes that burned too bright for someone knocking at death's door. Ethan knelt, pressing a hand against the bleeding wound. The stranger's fingers clutched at him, nails biting through his shirt, and with a voice like gravel dragged over stone, he rasped, "They'll kill us all. Holt!" Then his eyes rolled back, and he went still. Ethan swore under his breath. He could have left him there. Should have, perhaps. But something in that broken whisper clawed its way into his chest, and the weight of old memories pressed hard. He thought of his son, of the boy's pale face the morning the fever took him, of the helplessness that swallowed Ethan whole. He thought of his wife screaming as raiders dragged her away. And here lay another man, teetering between life and death, eyes pleading in ways words couldn't. Ethan tightened his jaw, hoisted the stranger across his shoulders, and carried him toward the horse. By the time he reached the ranch, the sky had gone purple with night. Coyotes called from the ridges, sharp and mocking. Ethan dragged the man into the barn, laying him on a bed of hay. He stoked a lamp, its light casting long shadows across the wooden beams, and set to work. His hands were rough from years of labor, but steady. He cleaned the wound, stitched it with shaking fingers, and poured whiskey over the raw edges. The man stirred once, groaning, but didn't wake. Hours passed. Ethan sat back against the stall, sweat dripping down his neck, the smell of blood and whiskey mingling in the air. He watched the stranger's chest rise and fall, shallow but steady. And in the quiet, the ghosts came again. He saw his boy, thin arms wrapped around a wooden toy horse, whispering, "Don't let me go, Pa." He saw his wife's eyes, filled with a sorrow that never left. Ethan pressed a hand to his face, willing the memories back into the dark corners where they belonged. But saving this man had torn something open inside him. The barn groaned in the wind, wood straining like an old man's bones. Ethan shifted, trying to shake off the unease prickling at the edges of his mind. Something about the stranger gnawed at him. His clothes were too fine for a drifter, tailored coat, polished boots, a revolver with silver engraving gleaming even in the lamplight. The initials carved into the handle caught Ethan's eye, though the letters blurred in the flicker of flame. Whoever this man was, he wasn't just some unlucky soul shot down by nameless bandits. Ethan rubbed his jaw, torn between regret and resolve. He'd acted on instinct, nothing more. The land had taught him that hesitation meant death, and he'd never been one to let a man be butchered before his eyes. But now, with the weight of this stranger in his barn, a question festered. Had he brought salvation into his home, or a curse? The night deepened. Coyotes fell silent, replaced by the whisper of wind threading through broken boards. Ethan dozed against the stall, rifle across his lap, the lamp dimming as oil burned low. He dreamt of fire, his house ablaze, his wife's voice calling from within, and his hands too weak to break through the door. He woke with a start, heart hammering. The barn was dark save for the last glow of the lamp, shadows swallowing every corner. He shifted, turning toward the hay where the stranger lay. Only the man wasn't still anymore. He was upright, eyes wide, face twisted in fury. Before Ethan could react, a hand shot out, clamping around his throat, squeezing with startling strength. Ethan's rifle clattered to the floor. The stranger's voice, low and venomous, cut through the darkness. "Why did you save me, old man? You don't know what you've done." The grip tightened, the lamplight flickered, and for the first time in years Ethan Cole felt the chill of fear crawl up his spine. Ethan's vision blurred as the stranger's grip pressed harder against his throat. He clawed at the man's wrist, teeth bared, breath failing. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the pressure eased. The wounded man collapsed backward into the hay, coughing violently, his strength spent as though the effort had drained the last of him. Ethan stumbled to his feet, snatching the rifle from the dirt, chest heaving. For a moment he considered ending it right there, one pull of the trigger, and this dangerous fool would trouble him no more. But the stranger lay sprawled in a heap, too weak to raise his head, the fire in his eyes dimming into feverish haze. Killing him now would not be justice, it would be something closer to execution. At dawn, Ethan rode into town. The air carried the smell of horses and smoke, the main street still quiet save for a blacksmith hammering iron in rhythmic strikes. He tied his reins outside the saloon and stepped toward the notice board nailed to the sheriff's office. Sunlight spilled over the paper pinned there, curling at the edges, but the face on it was unmistakable. The same sharp jaw, the same piercing eyes, though less hollow than the man gasping in his barn. Beneath the likeness was a name scrawled in bold print, Jesse Holt. Wanted for robbery, murder, and the torching of half a dozen frontier homes. A bounty higher than Ethan had ever seen promised for his capture, dead or alive. The truth struck like a hammer. He hadn't saved a victim. He'd dragged home the very kind of man who had once shattered his own life. His stomach turned bitter as bile, rage twisting through him. He remembered the blood on Holt's shirt, the engraved revolver, the sneer that accompanied his half-mad words. Ethan spat in the dirt, hatred and regret warring in his chest. Sheriff Dawes stepped from the office, a man thick around the middle but sharp-eyed, his badge glinting in the early sun. "Morning, Cole," he greeted, though his tone was cautious. His eyes flicked from Ethan's expression to the bounty notice. "You look like you seen a ghost." Ethan grunted. "Something like that." The sheriff studied him a beat longer, then lowered his voice. "Word is Holt's gang's been sniffing around again. They won't rest till they find their leader. If by some chance you lay eyes on him, best thing you can do is shoot first, ask nothing later." Ethan said nothing. His fists tightened at his sides. He could not tell the sheriff the truth, not yet. If Dawes knew Holt lay bleeding in his barn, half the town would descend on his ranch before sundown, and Ethan wasn't ready for that storm. By the time he returned home, sweat prickled down his back. He pushed open the barn door, rifle ready, expecting treachery. Instead, Holt lay where he had left him, though his eyes were open, watching with a strange stillness. "You know who I am now," Holt said, voice hoarse but steady. Ethan set the rifle aside, though his jaw remained clenched. "I know enough." Holt chuckled dryly, then winced as pain rippled through him. "You should have let me die out there. Would have saved you a heap of trouble." "Believe me, I'm thinking on it," Ethan snapped. He sat on a stool across from him, the air thick with mistrust. "You murdered families. Burned homes. Why in God's name should I waste breath on you?" The outlaw's gaze sharpened, cutting past Ethan's anger. "Because I didn't start this fight. Lawmen did. They killed my brother, shot him like a dog in the street. Everything I've done since, every raid, every bullet, it was a reckoning." His eyes narrowed. "And you, rancher, you look like a man who understands loss." The word struck deeper than Ethan expected. He wanted to snarl, to tell Holt he knew nothing about him, but silence betrayed the truth. Holt saw it, and the faintest smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. Outside, the wind shifted. Ethan caught sight of dust on the horizon, rising in long streaks like smoke. He froze. Riders, at least a dozen, moving with purpose across the plain. He turned back to Holt. "They're looking for you." "They won't stop," Holt answered, his voice almost serene. 200 men follow my banner. Blood's all they know." Ethan cursed under his breath. The barn suddenly felt too small, too exposed. He paced, torn between options. Turn Holt over and perhaps save himself, or keep him hidden and invite destruction. Either way, his quiet life on the ranch was finished. The following night, Ethan heard hoofbeats closer than before. He stepped outside with the rifle cradled in his arms, moonlight spilling silver across the yard. A lone figure approached from the dark, the sheriff himself, face drawn tight. He tossed something into the dirt at Ethan's boots, a crumpled scrap of paper, stained with blood. "Found this by Miller's Creek," Dawes said grimly. The paper was another wanted poster, Holt's face smeared but still visible. Beside it lay a badge, dented and slick with red. The sheriff's deputy had been killed. "They're circling the town, Cole. If Holt's anywhere near, it's only a matter of time." His eyes flicked toward the barn, suspicion flaring. "You seen anything? Heard anything?" Ethan felt Holt's presence behind him even without turning, the outlaw's labored breaths carrying through the open window. The truth burned on his tongue, but he forced it down. "Nothing but coyotes," he said flatly. Dawes stared at him, measuring. At last he nodded, though doubt lingered in his eyes. "Keep your rifle close. Storm's coming." He mounted his horse and rode back into the night. Ethan stood there long after the hoofbits faded, the weight of his choice heavy as iron. He looked toward the barn, where a shadow shifted against the lamplight. Holt's voice carried low and sharp, like the scrape of a knife. "You lied for me." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Don't mistake it for trust." Holt leaned against the doorframe, pale but standing now, his eyes glinting with something between gratitude and menace. "Trust or not, you've tied your fate to mine. And when they come, it won't matter what you want." The night pressed in around them, full of waiting silence, as if the land itself held its breath. Ethan's hands clenched on the rifle. He had chosen, though he could not yet see if it was salvation or ruin. Dawn broke in streaks of crimson, the kind of sky that promised blood before the day was done. Ethan stood on the porch, rifle cradled in his arms, watching the dust cloud building to the east. It rose like smoke from a battlefield, too broad for a handful of riders. His gut tightened. Holt's men had found them. The outlaw limped from the barn, pale but upright, revolver strapped awkwardly to his hip. His eyes carried that same fierce gleam, though his body still trembled with weakness. "They won't ask twice," he said, voice steady. "Hand me over, they might let you live." Ethan spat into the dirt. "And watch 'em string you up. I don't hand folks over like cattle. If they want you, they'll have to ride through me." A strange expression flickered across Holt's face, something caught between disbelief and grim respect. He gave a dry laugh. "You're a damn fool, rancher." The hoofbits thundered closer until the yard quivered with their weight. Dozens of riders encircled the ranch, their horses restless, their rifles gleaming in the rising sun. At their head, a scarred brute with a voice that carried like a war drum shouted, "Give us Holt, and we'll leave your bones in peace. Stand in the way, you'll be carrion before noon." Ethan raised the rifle, his words cutting sharp. "Step 1 foot closer, and I'll show you how a fool shoots." Silence hung a beat, then the world erupted. Gunfire tore through the morning, shattering boards, spraying dirt in sharp bursts. Holt ducked behind a water trough, firing back with quick, desperate shots. Ethan moved from cover to cover, his rifle cracking with practiced precision. Every shot he took was measured, cold, and final. 2 men toppled from their saddles, horses shrieking as they bolted into the chaos. Bullets ripped through the ranch walls, splinters stinging Ethan's skin. Smoke filled the air, acrid and choking. Holt cursed, reloading with shaking hands, his face slick with sweat. Between volleys, Ethan glanced at him, shouting above the din, "Why'd they follow you? What makes you worth din for?" Holt's laugh was bitter. "Power. Fear. Same thing in these lands. I gave them both." His revolver barked again, another rider spinning lifeless from his horse. "Now they'll burn it all to keep their leash tight." The barn groaned as a bullet struck the lantern inside, flames racing across dry timber. Horses screamed from within, kicking at their stalls. Ethan's chest tightened. He darted through smoke and fire, unbarring the gates, shouting until the beasts thundered free into the yard. Flames roared higher, licking the roof, sparks spilling across the ranch like angry stars. When he stumbled back outside, Holt was pinned against the well, firing wildly as riders closed in. Ethan shouldered his rifle, each shot carving space between Holt and death. For a brief moment, they fought like brothers, 2 men welded together by necessity, their lives hanging on one another's trigger pulls. As the gunfire lulled, Holt slumped, blood darkening his side again. He gritted his teeth, refusing to fall. Ethan crouched beside him, dragging him back behind cover. "You'll bleed out if we don't end this quick." Holt met his gaze, something raw burning in his eyes. "Endin, it ain't up to us. It's up to how much you're willin' to lose." The words cut deep. Ethan thought of his wife, of the boy who never reached manhood. He thought of the years wasted drowning in silence, waiting for nothing. A man already hollow had little left to lose. And yet here he was, fighting tooth and nail to keep another from death. Gunfire flared again, closer now, boots pounding against the porch as outlaws rushed forward. Ethan braced his rifle, every shot snapping with ruthless clarity. The porch rail shattered, the door splintered under their assault. The house that once held his family shook with violence, plaster raining from the ceiling. He shouted over the roar, voice jagged with rage. "You bastards already took everything worth Tarkeen from me. You won't take this land." For the first time, Holt looked at him not as a fool but as an equal. He managed a crooked smile even as blood soaked his shirt. "You're meaner than you look." The fighting pressed harder, the yard littered with bodies, the air thick with smoke. Holt's bullets slowed as his strength drained, his revolver hanging heavy in his hand. Ethan covered him, heart hammering, breath ragged. He could almost believe they might hold out, might break the enemy's will. Then came the roar of dynamite. A blast rocked the earth, throwing Ethan against the dirt. His ears rang, vision white with dust and flame. Through the haze, shadowed figures surged forward, guns flashing. He tried to rise, but the impact had rattled his bones. Rough hands seized him, dragging him back, and the world tilted. When the smoke cleared, the ranch lay in ruin. Walls collapsed, roof beams aflame, the air filled with sparks and screams. Ethan's limbs trembled as he forced himself upright, searching for Holt. But the outlaw was gone. On the charred wall of the barn, smeared in dark strokes of blood, a single message glistened in the firelight. ***, trust me. ***. Ethan staggered forward, chest burning, eyes locked on the words. The yard swirled with chaos, but for him, time slowed to silence. Holt had vanished into the storm, leaving only a promise carved in blood and flame. The night was not yet finished, and Ethan knew this fight had only begun. The canyon swallowed sound, its stone walls echoing with the restless shuffle of hooves and the low murmur of armed men. Ethan rode slow, his body aching from the blast that had leveled his ranch, smoke still clinging to his clothes. He followed the trail like a man compelled, every hoofprint in the dust pulling him deeper into Holt's world. The message scrawled in blood burned in his mind. "Trust me." Against all reason, against every scar the outlaw's kind had carved into him, Ethan followed. By midday the sun beat down like a hammer, heat bending the air. He dismounted and led his horse along the narrow canyon floor. Voices drifted from ahead, rough, eager, the sound of wolves before a kill. He crept forward until the passage widened, opening into a hollow ringed by stone. There they were. Holt's gang, dozens of them, hard-eyed and restless, their horses tethered to rocks. At the center stood Jesse Holt himself, no longer weak, no longer broken. He faced his men with the bearing of a man stepping into judgment. Ethan's pulse quickened. Holt had returned not as a fugitive but as a leader. Yet his stance was strange, straight-backed, unflinching, like a man who had already counted the cost. "You followed me, old man," Holt said without turning. His voice carried easily, as if he had known Ethan lingered in the shadows. "Guess I was right about you." Ethan stepped into the open, rifle loose at his side. "What game are you playing, Holt?" The outlaw's men shifted, hands brushing their pistols, but Holt lifted a hand and they stilled. His eyes found Ethan's, and in them burned something fierce but weary. "No game. Just an end. They'd tear the land apart hunting me, and I'm done letting others bleed for my sins. If they want blood, it'll be mine." A murmur rippled through the gang. Some looked confused, others furious. One spat in the dirt. "You've lost your damn mind. We ride, we take, we burn. That's what you made us." Holt's voice sharpened like steel drawn from its sheath. "No. That's what I made you believe. Today, you'll stand or you'll scatter, but you won't drag me down anymore." The tension snapped. A pistol cleared its holster, and the canyon exploded in chaos. Gunfire cracked, men dove for cover, horses screamed. Ethan dropped behind a boulder, returning fire with grim precision. Dust and smoke filled the air, the sound of bullets ricocheting against stone. Holt fought in the open, revolver blazing, cutting through his own men with the desperation of a man burning bridges as he crossed them. Every shot he fired was aimed at his past, every body that fell another chain broken. Ethan couldn't look away. For all his crimes, for all the blood he had spilled, Holt fought now with the fury of a man clawing toward redemption. The battle churned on, brutal and relentless. Men fell screaming, the canyon walls painted with their violence. Ethan's lungs burned from smoke, his shoulder raw from recoil, but he pushed forward, step by step, until he reached Holt's side. The outlaw staggered, a bullet lodged deep in his chest, but still he stood, teeth clenched, eyes wild. "You're finished," Ethan shouted over the din. Holt coughed blood, a grim smile cutting across his face. "Not yet." He raised his revolver, fired one last shot, and the scarred brute who had led the siege at Ethan's ranch toppled backward, lifeless in the dust. The gunfire sputtered, then died. Survivors scattered, their loyalty broken, their courage dissolved. Silence fell heavy, broken only by the groan of a dying horse and the ragged rasp of Holt's breath. Ethan caught him as his knees buckled, lowering him gently to the ground. Blood spread hot and fast beneath his hands, seeping into the dust. Holt's gaze found his, clear now, the madness burned away. "You didn't save the wrong man," he whispered. Each word came with effort, torn from the edge of death. "You gave me one last chance, to be right." Ethan's throat tightened, words lost behind a swell of grief. He pressed harder against the wound, though both of them knew it was useless. Holt exhaled, slow and final, eyes drifting toward the sky as if seeing something far beyond the canyon walls. His hand went slack, and the revolver slipped from his grip. For a long time, Ethan knelt there, the silence pressing in, broken only by the ringing in his ears. He had come to the canyon chasing answers, maybe even vengeance, but what he found was something stranger, an outlaw's redemption, and his own hollow heart stirred awake. By evening, the canyon lay empty save for the dead. Ethan saddled his horse, Holt's revolver tucked at his belt, its silver grip catching the last light of day. He rode back across the plain, the ruins of his ranch smoking in the distance, his past laid bare in every scar of the land. The fire had taken his home, and grief had long since taken his family, but the weight on his shoulders felt different now, lighter, though no less heavy. He had saved a man who many would call a monster, and in turn, that man had saved something long buried in Ethan himself. As night fell, stars pricking the endless dark, Ethan's voice rose soft against the silence, meant for no one yet carried on the wind. "Funny thing about savin' the wrong man. Sometimes, it's the only way a man can save himself." He rode on, the horizon swallowing him whole, a solitary figure etched against the wild west night. And for the first time in years, he did not ride alone in spirit. If this tale spoke to you, the voice of the narrator folds like a closing curtain, solemn yet inviting. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every story of the frontier carries a piece of us, loss, redemption, and the fire to keep riding on.